Welcome back to the channel, everybody. So guys, we're inside my test server account today, and I'm gonna be showing you some champions who quite honestly feel as if they shouldn't work this way with the recent Hex debuff changes, but they do work this way, and I absolutely love it. So before we get into it, let me give you guys a little bit of a breakdown on how Hex debuff works. So we're gonna draw 4 lines, okay? Just make it simple. 4 lines. These champions have Hex, so this champion has Hex, this champion has Hex, and this champion has Hex. I know, it's high quality, but bear with me. We're going to have your champion over here dealing damage, okay? This champion on the far left, no Hex debuff. Pretty simple stuff. So this champion, let's say, it doesn't matter. It can be whatever champion you want it to be. It can be Ray. I don't care. This champion does an AoE damage, and this champion over here takes 10,000 damage. This champion takes 10,000 damage, and this champion takes 10,000 damage. Well, each of these champions are going to have 2% of that damage shared to other champions who have Hex. So this champion's 10,000 damage is going to be shared 2% over here, and then 2% over here. It doesn't get 2% additional damage dealt to that same champion. This champion's 10,000 damage is also going to get 2% shared over here and over here. So now this champion is getting basically 4% shared. This champion is going to take the 10,000 damage, and its 2% is going to go over here and over here. So it's pretty simple stuff, right? All these champions are essentially getting 2% shared to the other champions. Okay, hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully this high quality drawing kind of gets the point across to you guys if you don't fully understand. That is how AoE attacks work. Now let's take it back a few steps and say that your champion, whoever it is, just has a single target hit. This single target hit does 10,000 damage, for example. This 10,000 damage is going to be shared at a 10% rate from this champion to this champion at 10%. So it's kind of hard to draw on the screen. I know my handwriting's bad as it is, but 10% goes over to this champion and 10% goes over to this champion. So this 10,000 damage hit is now being shared 1,000 damage to this champion and then 1,000 damage also to this champion, but it doesn't get any additional damage to this champion. You'll see that this champion over here, the far left champion, is being left out because they have no Hex debuff. You need the Hex debuff for the damage to be shared to that champion. Hopefully this makes sense. Now this is where these champions I'm about to show you basically break the game. If I say champions any more times, oh man, it's a lot of champions, daggone. But right here, guys, we have Versulf the Grim, we have Ruel the Huntsman, we have Magnar, and we have Krisk. Krisk is the outlier because he doesn't really do anything except for do a provoke, so it can activate Versulf's ability that looks so very cool. So we're going to go ahead and use A1 on Magnar because he's fast. Don't worry about that whatsoever. But then we're going to provoke with Krisk, so help Versulf out and actually use his ability. Now, the key of this is actually using Hex. If you don't have Hex, obviously the effects of Hex are not going to be there. Pretty simple stuff. So we're going to use Hex on everybody. Now pay attention to this, okay? This is where it's very important. Versulf's A2 ability attacks all enemies, places an extra hit on enemies under stun, sleep, yada, yada, yada. Each hit has a 75% chance of placing leech. The key to this ability, the first thing says attacks all enemies. That's an AoE. 2% of the damage dealt to this champion is going to be spread out to all these other champions. Same thing with all these other ones with Hex under them. However, the second hit doesn't work as an AoE hit. It works as a single target hit. Check out this damage, these red numbers, which you're going to want to watch. So we hit them all. Awesome animation, by the way. So we have 283 come in and then 1,300 damage. Okay, so it doesn't take a genius. It doesn't take a whiteboard drawing to see that the first hit, both the hits were pretty much the same damage, but the first hit shared 300 damage times 1, 2, 3, 4, more or less across all the champions. And the second hit did like 1,300 damage times 4. So obviously the second hit is sharing a lot more damage, which basically is giving you a 10, 20, 30, 40% damage increase from that second ability. So Ruel, let's see if he does the exact same thing. His first hit, all the red numbers are going to be 800, something like that, and then 2,900. So obviously same thing. He has that first hit. All the abilities are pretty low. The second hit are very, very hard. Basically, Ruel places extra hits on enemies under Hex. Magnar attacks all enemies, places an extra hit on enemies without HP burn debuffs. So let's see how this works. First hit, red numbers are 200. The other numbers are 1,200 and 1,600. So obviously, guys, the amount of damage that's boosted from the Hex debuff being on the waves definitely justifies, especially if you're trying to do any progressional stuff, even Doom Tower. Maybe start bringing some Hex champions in, Mithrala, but Hydra. Hydra is where I'm going to start doing it. I'm probably going to start building some teams with Ruel because that extra damage boosted across the entire run can definitely add up to some pretty significant damage. Now, let's go in here and look at a few other champions. Let me know which ones you guys can think of that I may have forgotten, but Mashald, the most recommended or most talked about champion as far as everybody's saying, yo, this guy is going to hit and do so much better. So his A1 ability, attacks one enemy, heals this champion by 30% of the damage inflicted, will then attack enemies under leech. So basically has a single target ability and then attacks all other enemies if they have leech. So it seems that this is basically a potential AoE conditional ability. So it's going to be most likely shared 10% across the board as well. His A2 places the buffs. His A3 attacks one enemy, has an 80% chance of stealing all buffs from the target before attacking, also places continuous heal, damage increased by 50% on targets who have no buffs. So basically, Mashald's A1 ability is going to hit the first target, do some pretty good damage because Mashald is definitely a very solid damage dealer, then do a second hit, do extra damage to all the other enemies under Hex, which is very, very nice. So you need to bring Mashald with a Hex champion, but he's definitely going to be putting out a lot of damage. Now, the next champion is Trunda that I want to mention. Trunda, I don't know for sure. Now, her A2 ability, I'm like 99.99% sure it does not work as a single target ability. I know that her coding, as far as the damage being spread out across people, does work as a single target ability, as in the fact that the masteries that reduce damage from AoE attacks doesn't seem to actually affect that, and this ability is just very bugged. But I don't believe the damage shared is 10%, so I don't think it works as a single target ability because it attacks one enemy, then attacks all other enemies. So there's no condition on her A2. Her A3, however, does have a condition. So it attacks all enemies, 70% chance of placing stun, places HP burn debuff for 2 turns on enemies under stun, places an extra hit on enemies not under stun. So I'm pretty sure this A3 ability should activate that single target 10% damage being spread to enemies under Hex. Not 100% sure because guess what? I don't have Trunda, so I'm not able to say. We have some ratings for her in the test server. Interesting. I think she's probably the only champion with reviews on the test server. Maybe Molly has a review as well. Very, very interesting stuff, but that's beside the point. So Trunda, Mashald, Verself, Magnar, and then literally the Ruel, the Huntsman, the guy who I just made a video on recently, but I went blank, which may or may not be out yet. But God, these champions definitely work with the damage being boosted from Hex, which I think is great. It only adds more damage to them, maybe makes them viable for different areas of the game. Hydra especially, I think this would be a very nice change to Hydra, because if you're doing, well, if you keep Hex up all the time, bring champions like Mithrala, or even just bring Ruel by himself. If you bring champions who can keep Hex up, you can bring these other champions and just get a pretty significant damage boost in general through all the champions, because these champions get double hits, but everybody on your team is going to have that single target ability or even that AoE ability being spread to all enemies under Hex. So guys, let me know what champions you want me to showcase or what champions you want me to test out to see if it actually works for them. But those are all the champions who I could think of who have a single target or AoE first hit and then a conditional second hit that's potentially AoE as well, depending on the conditions that are being met. So guys, with that said, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like down below, drop a sub if you want to see more content from me, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you all in the next video.